I'm excited to talk to you today about the Connected Learning Framework, exemplified by educators seeking professional development. Before I begin, I would like to thank Mr. Abdulrahman Ozer for contacting me about doing this presentation. My name is Melissa Vervinck. I hold a Doctor of Educational Technology, and I am the Director of the ESL Institute at Oakland University in Rochester, Michigan, United States of America. At Oakland, I oversee the Institute as well as work with pre-service teachers who are learning to teach English as a second language. My presentation today will focus on three areas. First, the Connected Learning Framework. Second, a brief overview of research related to the Connected Learning Framework and to adult learning and professional development. And then the third area, we'll be talking about how you can utilize the Connected Learning Framework as a connected learner. Before we begin talking about the Connected Learning Framework, here's a quote that I want you to keep in mind throughout this presentation. We, and that's referring to educators or really any adult, can't expect young people to be powerful learners if not surrounded by adults who are supported in being powerful learners themselves. And I think this is important to keep in mind because as educators, we are the ones who are mentoring and helping the students in our classroom to be lifelong learners. And it's no longer the case where learning stops as soon as students leave the classroom. Learning continues throughout a student's life and anywhere they are. And I think it's important as educators that we model that we are learners too. So let's talk about the Connected Learning Framework. I'm going to give you an overview of the entire framework, but this very first slide is the one that we should focus the most on because this is what we're going to be talking about later on in the presentation. But it's important to have an overview of all of it. But let's start here. So let's talk about the spheres of learning. Ito came up with spheres of learning in regards to youth. Item et al. Adapted that and applied it to adult learners. So I have listed here the words for both youth and adult. But if you notice, the spheres of learning and what they're talking about in the examples are the same. So for adults, we're colleague supported. That means the teacher in the classroom next door to you gives you feedback and help, as well as the administration in your building, possibly other educators in the city you live in, the town that you're in. But think more than that. Think that you can reach out internationally, globally, and get colleague support from people that you may never have met, but maybe teach the same subject as you do. That leads into being inquiry-driven for adults. That means when a subject is interesting to you and relevant, you want to learn more about it. So you're driven by your need to know. And that leads to the third area, which means that adults are improvement-oriented. So for adult learners, they want to get better at something. They want to improve. That maybe they want to improve their knowledge in how to fix something. So maybe they're using YouTube to look up a video about how to fix something that's broken at their house. But it also means that they want to learn how to be a better educator, maybe a different way to teach a certain topic, or maybe something that will help them advance in their career opportunities. So for the Connected Learning Framework, these three spheres of learning are key for adult learners, that they're colleague supported, inquiry driven, and improvement oriented. So stop for a second and think, how do these three areas apply to you? Are you colleague supported? Are you inquiry driven? And are you improvement oriented? So now I'd like to go through the core properties of the Connected Learning Framework, just so you have a brief background in this information. So the first core property is that it's production centered. So digital tools allow you to produce information and share it in a variety of ways, because also people learn things for a shared purpose. You don't just want to keep it to yourself. Using the internet allows you to share information cross-culturally. It also allows generations to share information, and that way things can continue to kind of unfold and thrive and grow. And also it's openly networked. So this information is available to everyone. It is not limited in any way. It is accessible to all learners in all settings. And now let's talk about the guiding design principle. There's 4 of these. First of all, everyone can participate, and you can provide different ways for individuals and groups to contribute information and knowledge, because learning happens by doing. So it's experiential, it's active, and there's meaningful projects and activities that people do in order to learn new things, because number 3, challenge is constant. There is a need to know and a need to share that is created. And going on to number 4, because everything is interconnected. So people are connected, contexts are connected. People can give feedback to others about ideas. And so everyone is accessible, there's planning and there's reflection all built into this. And the last area to talk about in regards to the connected learning framework is the role of new media. So this is interactive, it's immersive. So number 1, it fosters engagement and self-expression, because there's a diverse way of learning things, a diverse way of pacing information. For instance, if you're learning how to fix something, you may go to a YouTube video, watch it. You may have to stop the video, rewind it, and repeat. Maybe you have to rewind and repeat it 1 time, whereas I have to rewind and repeat it 5 times. That's okay. It's according to individual needs. Number 2, there's an increased accessibility to knowledge and learning experiences. So that you can find things online that 30 years ago you weren't able to find and learn more about. Number 3, you can expand social support for interests. So you can make connections with people that in the past you would not have had access to. So experts are able to contact novices or vice versa, so that the people that you can contact with, you wouldn't have had the opportunity to do that before. And then it also expands diversity and builds capacity. So anyone can take advantage of this and have a voice, can mobilize, can organize, and build that economic capacity for themselves and for others. So why is a connected learning framework so important? Why is it important to take charge of your own learning and be a lifelong learner? Well, there's some related research studies that support the need for especially educators to do this. Darling Hammond did a research study in 2008, and one quote from her research study stood out to me. Teachers learn best by studying, doing, reflecting, by collaborating with other teachers, by looking closely at students and their work, and by sharing what they see. In that same research study, she stated that only 57% of teachers in the United States reported they were receiving professional development of around 16 hours per year. If you do the math, that's less than 19 minutes per week spent on improving practice. So it's very important for teachers to take control of that. And there's ways to improve practice that do not involve going to meetings and sitting. There's ways to kind of take control of your own learning, which we'll be talking about. Moving on, it's important because pre-service teachers benefited from sharing resources and communicating and connecting with others inside and outside of the classroom. So the earlier these connections are made, the better the teacher will feel about continuing their learning. And one way to do that is through Twitter. And a research study by Carpenter and Krutka supports the fact that Twitter can be used for professional development. A survey of 755 K through 16 educators, and in the United States, K through 16 would be for students who are around 4 or 5 years old would be K, up through the university level. High school ends at grade 12, so then grades 13, 14, 15, and 16 would be the bachelor degree program in the United States. But of those who used Twitter, 96% reported they shared and acquired educational resources via Twitter. That is an astounding number who do that. They acknowledged they were learning from other educators, and one thing that was important was that it combated the feelings of isolationism, at least in the United States. In K through 12 or any grade, it's very easy to feel alone and not make those connections with other educators and have time to sit and discuss issues, problems, or give feedback to others about something that's worked well for you. So seeing how useful Twitter can be, I did research using Twitter also. So what I was looking at was a connected learning framework, which I introduced to you earlier, as well as using a publicly available Twitter account to see if the posts in this publicly available Twitter account supported those 3 areas of the connected learning framework, the spheres of learning of being colleague supported, improvement oriented, and inquiry driven. So I looked at a Twitter account and I collected tweets from October 2016 through to October 2017 of a group of participants who came to the United States for the April program. They were here from February 2017 through August of 2017. But if you notice, I looked at their tweets prior to coming to the United States and also after they returned. And on the next slide, let's talk about what I found. During this time, they posted 291 tweets, and all posts that they shared contained text. 2 original posts did not contain a photo or a video, and posts were written in both English and in Arabic. That meant some of them were in English, some of them were in Arabic, and some of them were in both. For the posts that were written in Arabic, I translated them and then had a native Arabic speaker check the translations for accuracy. It was interesting that I found that they were being followed by people from the United States, from Saudi Arabia, England, Libya, Canada, South Africa, Finland, Yemen, New Zealand, Scotland, Egypt, Australia, France, and India. So you can see that these were definitely connected learners and connected educators to people from around the globe. In fact, one video that they shared was shared with 671 followers and then retweeted by 4 others. And in total, the number of followers for all of those accounts would have been 16,858 people. So you can see that their reach was very far. And in fact, one of their favorited posts had 1,376 favorites on it after it had been shared by others. So the reach was definitely far. Reading and literacy were 2 themes which were found throughout their tweets, and 20 posts about literacy and the importance of reading were posted to the account. So that were 2 areas that were very strong for them. The next slide will look at exactly what words were used. So as I said, I had the words everything translated into English. And then what I did was try to see which words appeared the most often. And one way to do this was using a Wordle. So if you look at these, the words that are bigger were the words that occurred most often. And then as they get smaller, those words did not occur as often in the posts. So the most important words were school and learning. That meant these 2 words occurred the most in the posts that I looked at. But if you look at the next set of words, it's kind of telling what they were posting about. They were posting about projects, leadership, educators, ESL, plans, immersion, and development. That's what they were here for. They were here for a leadership program for educators, and part of the time they spent doing projects, part of the time they were in immersion, part of the time they were in ESL, and it was definitely for professional development. So it's interesting that you can look at something like tweets from an account for a year-long program, and it shows that these people were colleague supported, inquiry driven, and improvement oriented. So there's a lot more that I can go into about my research study, but I won't do that here. So just to kind of sum up the things that I found in this research study, Twitter can definitely be a meaningful conduit for educators. It allows them to expand their connections, their learning, and they can learn with others from around the globe. And also, if you view the tweets through the connected learning framework, it does support that extension of this framework to adult learners with those minor adaptations that Adal Edelman suggested. So as I said earlier, these learners were colleague supported, inquiry driven, and improvement oriented learners, all things that we can strive to be. And why do I keep saying the same 3 things? Because educators must be learners first and educators second. This was in the book, The Connected Learner by Nussbaum Beach. In fact, she said this 14 times. And you're going to ask, how do I know that? Did I go through and count it? No, I didn't, but I did have an electronic copy on my Kindle, and I was able to see through a search how many times learners first and educators second came up in that book. It was 14. This is an important statement, and I think it's an important statement for us to remember too, that we need to continue to be lifelong learners and educators. So how can we do that? Let's move on to the next slide. This sketch by Sylvia Duckworth sums up everything that I'm trying to say here. Connected learners need a professional learning network. So how can you do that? The research is wonderful, but to be honest, what I want to see you do is to put this research into action. So what can you do? What can you do as you leave this presentation? Well, first of all, you can share your ideas and share them globally. You can network with professional learning networks around the world to cultivate relationships. You can begin gathering resources. You can be motivated by others, inspired by others, collaborate with others, and gain a new perspective of different cultures and different pedagogies. It's important to model this for students and other colleagues because you're never going to run out of ideas if you keep doing this. It can be fun at any time of the day. You can connect your students as well as other colleagues because you can understand that everyone benefits from this global community of learners. And being part of that global community will help you become a better educator. And as I said, model that skill of being a lifelong learner. One way to do this is through Twitter. Let's move on to the next slide and talk about Twitter. Whoops, wait a second. Before we move on, really quickly, go back to the statement by Darlene Hammond. Teachers learn best by studying, doing, and reflecting, by collaborating with other teachers, by looking closely at students and their work, and by sharing what they see. Keep that in mind. Now let's move on to the next slide. Now, before I start this, I'll tell you, Twitter, I like it some days and other days not so much. I'm afraid I'm going to spend too much time on Twitter, but I see it as a way to make connections and continue connections that I may not have any other way. One thing that you can do is start searching using Twitter hashtags. A hashtag is a way to group ideas. You can post to a hashtag. So maybe you're talking about something that happened in your class. For me, it would be an ESL class, so I'd put a hashtag ESL. Then if I want to go through, I can search for everything that people have posted using that same hashtag. That way I can kind of group information. This list is from a Cybraryman. You can find it on his site. The other thing you can do is to use these hashtags as a way to start searching for live chats. And live chats are when people are on Twitter at the same time, using the same hashtag and answering questions and interacting with each other. I'll warn you, it's fast-paced and sometimes difficult to keep up with, but it is a great thing to try. And even if you're not able to do a live chat, you can always go back at a later time and look through the live chat and see what people posted. But as you can see here, there are so many different subject areas, different tech areas, leadership areas, everything that you can begin searching and beginning to build your own professional learning network using Twitter. Try it. Let me know if you like it. So let's just kind of sum up the things I talked about here. I started off by talking about the connected learning framework and really focused on how it's applicable for adults. So I talked about how it's colleague supported, inquiry driven, improvement oriented. Think for yourself. Are these true for you? Are you colleague supported? If not, what can you do to support colleagues and to be supported yourself? Are you inquiry driven? Is there something that you're interested in learning more about? Time to go find out about that topic. And are you improvement oriented? For instance, you're here, so you must want to know more about education. How are you going to take these ideas that you're learning during this conference and improve your practice? The second thing I talked about was the need to exemplify what it truly means to be a lifelong learner. If you want your students to be lifelong learners, then you have to model that also. And then one way I suggested was to use Twitter. Twitter can facilitate your learning and use Twitter to connect with other people who have like interests. Just one idea. I'm sure you can come up with others. Here's a list of references I've used throughout this presentation. One I would like to highlight is the last one. If you notice, it starts with my name, Vervinck and DeSchrijver. This is the Connected Learning Framework exemplified by a Saudi Arabian educator via Twitter. It's in the proceedings of the 2018 Connected Learning Summit. I presented it in Boston in August. You may look up the proceedings online. Open access. Feel free to take a look at what the research study that I did, that I also gave you a brief overview here during this presentation. And once again, my name is Melissa Vervinck. Here is my email address as well as my Twitter account. Feel free to follow me on Twitter. Feel free to email me if you have any questions or if I may be of help in any way. I appreciate you listening to my presentation. I hope that you have learned something, and I also hope that you too become a connected learner to model what it means to be a lifelong learner for your students. Thank you very much.